if everyone would rise and say the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Guess I got it started a little bit too quickly here, Mrs. Avanzato, so I'm sorry about that. Okay, Lorraine, could you please call the roll?
Linda Avanzato.
Here.
Melvoin Benson. John Vascarden.
Here.
Larry Cerisi. William Mudge. Kimberly Page.
Here.
Richard Welsh.
Here.
Julia Held. Student Representative. Thank you.
I believe Julia said that she was.
Yes, Julia Held had emailed us all and said that she wasn't able to be here tonight, so due to a sudden work commitment. So, Lorraine, could you please go over the calendar?
January 18th, Wellness Subcommittee meeting, 3:30 p.m., Fishing Cove School. January 20th, Policy Subcommittee meeting, 9 a.m., Central Administration Building. January 24th, School Committee Business Meeting, 7 p.m., North Kingstown High School Auditorium. January 27th, Professional Development Day, no school for students. February 7th, School Committee Budget Meeting, 7 p.m., North Kingstown High School Auditorium. February 13th, CLAC meeting, 7 p.m., Central Administration Building. February 20th, President's Day, all school and offices closed and winter recess begins. February 27th, winter recess ends. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we next have a presentation by Dr. Humbert. So this is on the Race to the Top initiative, so go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can, but I don't think you're mic'd.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I just wanted to use this time.
There's some feedback of some kind. Everyone hear that? Here we go.
I just wanted to take this time this evening to give you an update on the major initiatives from Race to the Top. We are really immersed in the work, especially the first three initiatives. So this will be a nice chance for us to just get updated, see where we are, where we're headed, and what some of the impacts are for us. As you're probably aware, Race to the Top is part of the ERA funds. It was a $4.3 billion reform fund that was made available through the U.S. Department of Education. And in 2010, as you're, I'm sure, aware, Rhode Island was a recipient of the Race to the Top grant, and we received $75 million, which is funding some of these initiatives. And so the overall goal that the Rhode Island Department of Education has established is to prepare all students for success in college and career and life. So there are 5 major projects or support systems. We have standards and curriculum, instructional improvement systems, educator effectiveness, human capital development, and school transformation and innovation. So just going to walk through each one of these very briefly. The first one is the standards and curriculum, and it has 3 main elements. The first is the Common Core standards. This is as I don't know if you're aware, but I'm sure you've heard of the Common Core standards, but approximately 46 states have now adopted these standards, and so it's nationally everybody is immersed in this work. And we had some formal study of the standard sessions, they're called, last year, where about 72 educators were trained in the study of the standards. The second element is the curriculum development. We've been working with the Dana Center. They are based at the University of Texas, and they help organizations to look at curriculum, and they really are focused in science and math. So we are working with them for our math development. Our teachers, there's about 11 of them that are on the writing team. They have completed a scope and sequence at this point for our math, and that scope and sequence has been reviewed by many of our teachers through a survey. They have provided input, and this will be reviewed at the end of January in 2 writing sessions and revised. From there, starting next year, we will develop our math curriculum. We're hoping to take this Dana Center model and use the same type of model, not through the Dana Center, but through sort of a consortium of districts, and take an ELA scope and sequence that's already been developed, take that scope and sequence and build on that and develop an ELA curriculum. That will save us some time and some expense. And we need to save some time because, number 3, the PARCC assessments will be on our doorstep. This is the state assessments that are replacing NECAP for English language arts and math, and they are going to be administered in 2014. So we have actually already created a backwards map so that we'll be ready for this. These assessments are in literacy and mathematics, and we will be testing grades 3 to 11, which is a little bit different. Grades 9 and 10 have not had NECAP assessments, so it will be all of these grades. And very importantly for us is that grades 5 through 11 are expected to take this assessment online. So we have some impacts for us. Obviously, the continued PD, we won't have the formal sessions, the study of the standard sessions, but we will be continuing PD through our faculty meetings and our common planning time and our PD days. In fact, on January 27th, we have an emphasis on the Common Core standards for math that our teachers will be studying. And then the next thing is the scope and sequences that I talked about in the development of the curriculum. With that goes materials. We'll be needing to look at resources to support this work because the standards are a little bit different from the GLEs and the GSEs that we have been working with, although they are very close. Also, we'll be needing to align our elementary report cards. The K report card has already been aligned. We'll be aligning the grades 1 through 5. And we also have to look at how we're going to accomplish these standards for our kindergarten with a half-day program. And the last thing, following the PARCC timeline that we've established for our instructional and assessments, we have to be sure that everything is aligned to the Common Core standards. The implication for online testing, of course, is that we're going to need capacity for our computers and for Wi-Fi. We've been participating in CLOs, it's listed there. Those are collaborative learning for outcome groups. As part of this grant, there's a requirement to provide quarterly reports on our progress with the Race to the Top initiatives and to attend meetings that are sort of regional meetings that we have been attending. The next one of the major support systems is the instructional improvement system. This probably is not as widely familiar to people. This basically is a huge engine called the instruction management system. That's number 1 there. It will be a one-stop shopping for all of our curriculum and all of our assessments. So it will be an easy place, well, I say easy, but it will be a place for educators to enter the engine and be able to hopefully navigate to find out some of the assessments, to look at the Common Core, which will be listed there. There's a PD component to this on the formative assessments. There will be online modules for teachers. There is money budgeted through Race to the Top for that work. And that is to get people acquainted with the formative assessments and their use. There's also a whole interim assessment piece. This is very interesting. There's a test building engine where assessments can be created. Some of them are fixed assessments. Those are already there for English language arts and math. But there will also be opportunities for teachers to go in and as teams to use item banks to create tests for science and social studies, English language arts, and mathematics. And there will also be free-form tests that an individual teacher can go in and create a test to align with the instruction that he or she is doing. Some of these tests will have fees associated with them. The fixed tests are produced by Measured Progress. That's the same company that makes the kneecap test. And then the last piece we don't have to worry about just yet, but we will when 2014 rolls around, and that is an early warning system, which is prevention of school dropout. Just thought I would share with you this slide just to show you how robust this engine is. You can see on the left there are collections that we already have that RIDE performs for us through our eRIDE system. And then in the middle, you'll see 3 boxes that say LEA, LEA, LEA. That's the input that we will be giving into this system. And then it will result in the 3 engines that you see on the right. We have the IMS, which is that instructional management system. We have the EPSS, which is the Educator Performance Support System that's associated with our Educator Evaluation System. And then we have the GMV, that's a growth model visualization that's also associated with our evaluation system. So RIDE has periodically has some expectations for us. This is just an example of some of the things they are requiring of LEAs. The first one is a contributing educator policy, which we have already developed. This policy asks us to list in the district who will be teacher of record and who will be contributing educators. And what that means is, say a teacher is responsible for teaching English language arts to a student. Are there other educators that are also responsible for that student growing in that content area? For example, a reading specialist might be a contributing educator. A media specialist might be. A special educator might be. So we needed to determine who would be our contributing educators and who would be our teachers of record. So we have done that. We've reconfigured our student information system. That's our Aspen system, so that we can provide the data that's being asked for us. So some of that involved creating classes for the elementary teachers, which was a long, laborious process. In our IT department, our data manager, Sherry Briggs, and some staff have been working to accomplish that. The next piece will be for teachers to verify the lists that are associated with them. It's called roster verification. They have a roster of students that they are teaching, and they will need to verify that, and then the principals will need to verify that. That's so that we know which teachers are teaching which children, so that when we track progress, we know which students have had certain teachers. So the impact for us is some implications. First of all, the training for this, there's not enough money to train everybody in this big system. So there is a train-the-trainer model, and we can jump on board this summer, or some schools may be asked to jump on board the following summer and try to at least begin that training that we will then distribute to the rest of staff members. We also need to keep updating that teacher course student, the policy that I talked about. We have to do that data, update it on a daily basis because it continuously changes. We also need to develop our assessments aligned to the Common Core. And then if we're going to use this system, we may choose to use it or not. It is optional. If we choose to use those systems and maybe not use some of our assessments, we need to have a handle on that. So we need to do a comprehensive assessment of all of our assessments. And that will be something we'll be working on next. And then, of course, educators will need time to input their assessment data, and we will need funds if we're going to use those assessment pieces. The third major one, and this is really the last one that has a tremendous impact for us, has been the Rhode Island model of the evaluating system for teachers. And it's really for educators because the administrators are also in this process right now. And so we're approaching the final module trainings for that, the Module 4 trainings. So everybody will have the final trainings for this year, but those trainings are going to continue. There will be some intensive training, like 5 days straight in the summer for building administrators and for teachers. Well, for building administrators first, so retract that. And so the system, as you're probably aware, has several components to it. The evaluation system, we're in a gradual implementation right now, and that involves educators creating their goals, a professional growth goal, as well as student learning objectives. They're also meeting for conferences and being observed and submitting artifacts for their work as evidence of their progress on these rubrics. There are 2 rubrics, one for professional practice and one for professional responsibilities. So it's a tremendous amount of work. It's an extremely comprehensive system. And then we have the growth model. That is not in effect until 2013, 2014. And that is going to look at the progress of students to see how much they have progressed. And that will be measured by looking at peers who had the same rating of proficiency in the state assessment, and to compare a student against academic peers to see what the expected level of growth would be. So that will be coming upon us, 2013, 2014. And then the EPS, as I referred to before, that is just the digital hub that will actually house all of the rubrics, all of the forms, and the tracking system, all of the ratings for teachers and building administrators. Right now, everything is done basically paper and spreadsheets, Excel sheets, etc. But there will be a whole system for this. So the impact, obviously, there's going to be more PD that's involved with this. Also, the time when we go to full implementation next year will be very time-consuming. The burden will be increased. We also have to train people for the online use of the tools for that big system and for tracking, and we have to keep updating that TCS data. Can't escape that one. The capital development, number 4 here, basically refers to the induction program, and that is a mentoring program. We have about 10 teachers that are first-year teachers that have mentors that come in and do observations and meet with the teachers and give them the support they need. And the last one is not upon us yet, but this is for, it really identifies low-achieving schools and is meant to really to target traditionally underserved students. And there will be math modules that are part of this, and the students will be able to get some support in algebra and geometry. So that's basically the overview. I have another handout. What I gave you is a copy of the PowerPoint, but also a timeline for the Common Core transition. Is the one that's in color, and it shows where we have the implementation at each grade level, as well as the assessments for each grade level. And then what I will pass out before the end of the evening is the whole overview for the Race to the Top initiatives. This is a really good resource and a good reference tool for you. If you have any questions, you can either ask me now or call me or email me. Does anybody have any immediate questions?
Go ahead, Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, just a comment, and I apologize for my tardiness this evening. That's probably the only thing I graduated top of my high school class was the tardy list. I think I was the...
we have an engine for you.
I just wanted to thank you for your time and efforts in the presentation. I know there's, obviously, we all know there's a lot of changes going on with education, not only throughout the state, but throughout the country, and there's an awful lot of material and implementation. So, and I know to compound that, you come into a new school district as well, so and you've really jumped in and really took charge on this, so I just wanted to tell you that I appreciate that and definitely recognize that. So,
Mrs. Aventado, and then Dr. Ajay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll just keep it quick. Quick question regarding the change from NECAP to, what's the name of the test?
PARCC.
And as far as the PARCC, is everyone going to be using that eventually then? The whole
that part is mandatory, yes.
Wow, so, and that doesn't take place until 2014, correct?
Right. but that is aligned with the Common Core standards. So there are some adjustments in instruction that we need to make.
And technology is obviously a large part of all of this, from what I can see.
Right, and I was hoping that you would have that as a takeaway, because every one of the initiatives has a technology piece to it.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're
I found
welcome.
it very informative. I had no idea that it was going to be changing that quickly from kneecaps to park.
Dr. O'Shea?
I just wanted to comment. First of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Humbert for overseeing all this. I cannot imagine doing both this and everything else at the same time. So it's really nice having her leadership here to guide us through all of this. It's a huge endeavor, as you can see. It's very high-tech, and it's very all-encompassing. I mean, a student can be in any district in Rhode Island, and their records will be following them around in detail. To the point, and where teachers are being evaluated, the growth of their students in math and ELA will be tracked. And part of that evaluation system is dependent upon how similar students who have scored in the range that students had scored in years previous, how they're doing at this point. So it's a very heavy, high-tech program. There's a lot of analysis involved. There's a lot of moving parts. People like Sherry Briggs, Rich Booth have been all over this. Michelle has been all over this. And you know, this is every district. You know, we talk about just this park test, for instance. Grades 5 through 11, they're looking at testing more than once a year and doing that electronically. So right now we have tests that happen a few times a year, and they're electronic, the NWEA program. But this brings a whole new set of issues for every school district. You know, the amount of broadband that districts have, the amount of computers at any one particular school, so that all the students can do this at the same time at a particular grade level. So there's a lot to this, and you know, we're going to keep you informed about this every step of the way. And I know that the people on this stage are interested, and yes, it does come with some additional costs. Some of them are handled through Race to the Top funding, as Dr. Humbert pointed out, but some of them are not. And so, you know, those are things that we're going to have to continue to consider as we move forward.
I'll just go down the line here. So, Mr. Welch.
Yes, I also want to thank you for your time and effort, and I know you've thrown in a very short period of time to come into our district and help us with this. My concerns that I wanted to express to the public is that at some point, Race to the Top funds is going to disappear, and it's going to become the burden on the district, things that we're not covering right at the present time. We're going to get up to speed, but then it's going to be one of those mandates that's going to come down on us, and we're all going to be asking, where is the money coming from? We've got a couple of years yet to go on it, but it's on the road to come to us. I will say that Saturday, I had the opportunity to, at the Rhode Island Association of School Committees, they talked to us at length about the induction coaches and that whole program. And if that was the only thing that came out of Race to the Top, I'd have to say that what a win that is for new teachers and the students. And for those people who don't understand, it's different from what it's been in the past, where you'd have a senior teacher being able to answer questions. These induction coaches are going right into the classrooms and spending 90 minutes a week, right, in the classroom? Yeah. And they're actually answering the questions and helping these young teachers, these new teachers, control their classrooms, prepare for their classrooms, et cetera. It's really, I think, a fantastic thing that is going to come out of Race to the Top, and I hope we can continue it after those funds disappear. Thank you.
Mr. Busgarden.
Thanks, Kim. Dr. Humbert and Dr. Auger, kind of an open question. Taken off of what Ms. Amazano asked you about the technology, have we done any analysis of what we have and what we need to have to make this thing a success? Has that been done yet?
We have, we have kind of checkups with the Department of Education from time to time, and quite often we'll bring, Mr. Booth or Sherry Briggs, who is our data person, to ride meetings with us. And sometimes that's who's called for, the assistant superintendent and your data person. And so we feel as confident, I think, as any district in the state that we're, as ready as any other district. Now, that being said, there are still pieces, for instance, all students taking the assessment at the same time on electronically, that we don't have in place yet, but no one else does either, So a lot of this, and I know you're all going to be surprised about this, is building a plane as you're flying it, and so we are still waiting for some details about how that piece of it is supposed to come about, and what kind of funding may be involved to help districts to get that kind of support. I feel very good that we're in as good a spot as just about any district to handle that. But if they said today you have to have all of your students take an online test at the same time, we're not ready. So we're kind of waiting and seeing ourselves.
I would just hate to see technology be the negative of something that's so important to the kids' education, something we can control.
And we do have two district committees that are working. We have one that's working with the educator evaluation so that we can continually reflect on the progress that we're making and improvements that we need, and then to provide feedback at the end of the year to RIDE. We also have a technology committee, so we're creating our plan for submission for June, and we're working on the capacity right now, so that's helping.
Mrs. Benson, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Huber, I just have a couple of questions. So it looks from here that the PARCC test is a spring test rather than a fall test?
It's actually going to be one test 3/4 of the year through, so around springtime, and then one at the end of the school year. The first one will have more constructed response that requires extra time or longer time to score. And then the final one will have more multiple choice options, so that can be scored more quickly, so that the goal is to try to have all the results within that school year.
Will we still, at the high school, have finals in addition to the PARCC test?
Well, when I was explaining about the comprehensive assessment system and how we're going to be looking at that, that's going to be part of the whole study, because we really will have to, we can't be over-assessing. So we have to really discriminate as to what testing we need to do, and watch for redundancy, watch for obvious test fatigue. So the timing of tests will be important. And then we have the option of these interim assessments as well. And the state is trying to stagger those so that they won't fall with the PARCC testing as well. So there's a lot to consider, and I think you really need to be strategic about it.
Okay. When you were talking about the teacher evaluations, we're not quite at the halfway point yet for the year.
have all the teachers in our districts, or most, at least had like one look so far? Because I know that you have to have more than one for the evaluations. So how is that?
At the elementary level, almost all of the long observations are completed. So we had all of the goal setting was completed at the beginning of the school year, and then the high school opted to do their short evaluations, observations first, and they're moving now into their longer observations, which is basically about 30 to 45 minutes. The short observations are about 15 minutes in length, a minimum of 15 minutes. All with follow-up feedback, written feedback to the teachers. And also the building administrators are participating in this. And the elementary principals have completed, in almost all cases, have completed their long observations, and now they're moving into their short evaluations.
Thank you. Mr. Welch.
Excuse me, we're approaching the mid-year conferences at this point. This is the next milestone.
Oh, okay.
And then following that will be the, of course, more short observations, and then the final ratings at the end of the year, with another end-of-the-year conference.
Just one quick question. When are the teachers going to have time to teach?
Well, and that's another question with the assessments. We have to be very careful. If you're over-assessing, you really are decreasing the amount of instruction time. So you raise a very valid point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are no other questions, then thank you very much. We appreciate your time. All right. Moving on to correspondence. We have some correspondence in our packets. Does anybody have any correspondence to add? Mrs. Avanzato.
Yes, I received an email regarding one of our seniors, Mike Grenier, who received a very prestigious scholarship, the Horatio Alger Scholarship Award, which, from what I understand, there are 104 total given out in the country, and this is the only one given out in the state of Rhode Island. It went to one of our seniors, so just congratulations to him, and he put a lot of hard work in, and he's also a musician, and that I don't know if that relates to the award. It may well, so I wanted to recognize him.
Yeah, I think, Dr. Auger, you had said that we were going to do something more than just announce that at the table, so it'll be on a future agenda.
Right.
Excellent.
Mrs. Benson.
I have some correspondence, some things that were left with me. I didn't get to see the person who delivered them, but I have some letters here from parents and from workers of the importance of the cafeteria and those things, and I will enter them into the record. There's a sum total of 26 of them. Some are non-workers for the school committee, for the school department, and some are workers. They only asked if I would bring this to the school committee, and as I said, I wasn't home to ask them the particulars of this, but they left a note and said they would like for it to be entered into the record. So I will give them to the secretary, and they are very, very interesting. Somehow, each member of the committee should be able to read some of them. So if we have enough paper and we can spare it, I think it would be very thought-provoking for us to read them, the other members. So I'll give them to you at the break, Noreen.
Thank you very much. I received correspondence from Mrs. Kayaza informing us of the gold and silver key winners of the Scholastic Art Competition. North Kingstown High School put on the second largest, I should say, was awarded the second largest amount of awards in the state. And so I will read those names. I think we all received this correspondence, but we had Christy Fiona for photography received the gold key. Brittany Parfit received painting, a gold key. Emily Roberts for photography portfolio received a gold key, and then the rest are all silver keys. Hannah Blackwood for painting, Jessica Bouchard for digital art, Sabrina Croto for painting, Valerie Fortin for painting, Tally Larkin for drawing, Vaughn Nelson Lee for digital art, Garrett Osgood for digital art, Helen Richter for painting, and Alex Zuckerman for ceramics and glass. So congratulations to them. And I think, from what I remember from is that they will also be having some sort of a presentation. We usually award something to the Golden Key winners and the Silver Key winners. So, is there any other correspondence? All right. That brings us to citizens' comment. This is a work session, so it is the sort of thing at any time before any of the votes. If we have not, if before any of the votes anyone would like to get up and say anything, please come to the mic, and as soon as I see you, I will recognize you, and I will allow you to speak. So we have on the agenda for tonight, Richard August has signed up.
I have a procedural question for you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Before Mr. August speaks. There is a new ruling, and I checked with the Attorney General, and I checked with the person in his office concerning open meeting. I asked a question at one of the meetings of a citizen who was talking, and I was ruled out of order. You can ask a question unless that's one of our rules, if the policy committee, but you cannot vote on it. But when Mr. August is speaking, if I need to ask him a question to better understand what he's speaking about, are you still going by that rule or what? Because they said you may ask the person a question to better understand the policies that of whatever they are talking about for your benefit as a member. But I had no intentions of voting on anything when I asked the question, and I was ruled and given a legal opinion by the attorney. So does that still stand, Madam Attorney?
You have a policy in North Kingstown under citizens' comments that allows citizens to make a comment.
That's correct.
And you do not, under your policy, allow for questions and answers. I think what you're referring to, Mrs. Benson, is there has been a decision in some committees where they have an open forum that you can ask a question, but you've never done that in North Kingstown because of the policy that you have regarding citizens' comments. On your agenda, it says citizens' comments. It does not say open forum.
It wasn't a forum, so the person who is chair of the policy committee, are you still chair, Madam?
Yes, I still have that position.
I would like to make a request that you look into that, because there will be something that is said that some member of the committee would like to ask him, would he explain this? Then we can better understand the comments that citizens are making. So that was the point I wanted to bring out before the citizens' comment. So I would ask that that be put in the record, that I ask that we look to that and be given a legal advice as to what comes first, local policies or state policies. That's all.
One moment, Mr. August. Mrs. Aventero.
Just very quickly, we had some previous discussion at the table about this issue, and I had asked publicly some questions of our legal counsel about this. My understanding that it is allowed, permissible under the Open Meetings Act, to have a back and forth, but it is totally in the discretion of the chair and the committee whether or not that happens. We have 7 members of this committee. That's a lot of members, and it's a lot of back and forth, and that's a lot of time. Many times we don't get through our agendas, and I would leave it to the latitude of the chair. I think that that's appropriate. It's more of a procedural than a legal issue. It's not that we can't do it. It's just that we usually don't do it because it prolongs the meetings and there's no control.
That was my point in asking, But that brings up another question, Mrs. Avisano. Is it the procedure and the policies of the committee? Do they supersede the policies of the state as regarding some of these things? And I won't prolong it any further because you can see when 10 pounds of beans in one bag and you got 1 pound in the other. So that was something I wanted to clear up, because I feel that anytime Mr. August come before us, he usually brings some timely information and some varied things. And we cannot understand what citizens want. And I'm very much aware, Mrs. Avisano, of 7 members. And I think time is something that none of us put on our point of order. You cannot interrupt a point of order.
All right. Let's wrap it up here and let's get on to citizens' comments. And I will have the Mr. Cerisi.
I thought you were going to citizens' comment.
We are, but he did raise a point of order. So, what is your point of order?
I concur with you, Madam Chair. This is kind of dialogue is the exact reasons why we don't finish agendas. Can we please move to citizens' comments?
Mrs. Benson, we will take a look at this.
I disagree with you, Mr. Cerisi.
Okay.
I don't think any of us put on our campaign literature that we would be regulated by time.
Okay. We will take a look at this in the policy meeting we have on the 20th.
Thank you. That was the question I was asking you.
Mr. August.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. My name is Richard J. August, and I was going to identify myself as chairman of the Town Audit Committee, but a couple of hours ago I looked at the town website and I see that I'm no longer listed as a member of that body, so I'm not really sure what my status is. So I'll just make my comments to you as a private citizen who resides at 79 Apple Tree Court. Madam Chairperson, I'd like to express a couple of concerns this evening with regard to the special examination of the school department's projected deficit that's being conducted by Nato Wadovic LLC. I've received a copy of the consent order signed by the school committee's legal counsel and town solicitor dated December 19th. There was a 9-point proposal from Nato Wadovic that was presented, which does not address the requirement of the consent order that, quote, the independent auditor identify areas in which cost savings can be effected so as to avoid debt, and I think that word should have been deficit, in fiscal year 2012, close quote. The school department has complied with the first paragraph of the consent order by submitting a 2-part deficit elimination plan to the Auditor General. In the event Nato Wadovic comes up with a list of cost savings and the Auditor General approves the district's plan under Rhode Island General Law 16-9-1, my question is, which one is the school department supposed to follow? In other words, does it violate Rhode Island General Law, or does it ignore a court order? For that reason, Madam Chairperson, I strongly suggest that this committee enter into a written, and I emphasize written agreement and understanding with the town council regarding which would take precedent in the event the auditor comes up with a list of cost savings that differs from the plan approved by the Auditor General. And perhaps it could be framed in the sense that if the auditor's recommendation addresses some areas that prove to be unfeasible in the plan approved by the Auditor General, they could come into play. And I'll close by saying I intend to raise these concerns at the next town council meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other citizens' comments? Come on up to the microphone.
Hi, sorry I didn't sign up. Barbara Green, 5 Sherman Street in North Kingstown. I just have a question for the doctor who did the PowerPoint presentation a little while ago. Very nice, thank you. When you talk about beginning to compare results with the student testing of their peers of previous classes beginning in 2013, 2014, what years are you thinking of as far as the comparison? Because I can tell you, just between 2006 and 2008, it was a totally different system with regard to testing, what was expected of the kids, the learning curve. And I was just wondering what previous peer groups you were thinking of getting the data from to compare 2013 and 14 to.
Right. It's a little bit complex to explain, but what will happen is if a student scores at a certain number, they will look at all of the students in the state that also scored at that number, and those are called the academic peers.
So it's not just North Kingstown.
No, right, because they're looking for a large sample, because of all the statistics, we want it to be statistically significant. So they're using the sample of all of the Rhode Island students, and then through formulas and psychometrics magic, they're going to then estimate what a child at that level, according to how all the other students in that same score, how they progress, and then from there they'll estimate what the anticipated growth would be. And judging from where the teacher's students fall on that the following year, then that's how they're going to determine this. So it's very complicated.
Okay, no pat answer then, in other words.
Well, there is a pat answer, but I think it's too lengthy to go into. It's probably an hour PowerPoint all on its own. Yeah, okay. But they will be looking at 2 years of data for the teacher.
Okay, thank you.
That's my understanding.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other citizens' comments? All right, moving on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I would like to have Mr. Marcello come up to the mic, if he would. Mr. Welch had specifically asked about this particular question back when we did our last budget cutting. Last year, we talked about $30,000 in cuts from the athletic department, and over some time, Mr. Marcello has been working this out, and we do have those cuts, and I just want him to explain just some of the details about where those come from.
Thank you very much. The budget that was presented to me, the cuts were essentially already made for me. There are two basic areas. The salaries that are allotted for the high school, the department request was for $125,000. The final budget was $105,000. So that's $20,000 of the budget cuts for the athletic department. The second area was transportation for the high school. Again, the department request was for $57,500, and the final allotted budget was $47,500. So for a total of $30,000 in reductions. The total budget amount for salaries for the high school, Davisville Middle, and Wickford for coaches for this year is $216,050. What we are going to pay out totals $219 at $219,740.29, leaving the budget a deficit of $3,690.29. How do I cover the above-noted deficit? In the original budget, we were allotted $17,500 to cover ice rink rental time at Boss Arena. That has been reduced to $12,300, thereby leaving a surplus of $5,200, which we can transfer over to the salary account, leaving a plus balance for the salaries of $1,590.71. I was going to put all this on paper and pass it out to you, but in an effort to save a few trees, I can send this along, all these facts and figures, to the school committee as attachments on an email. Let's move on to transportation. How am I going to cover the $10,000 deficit? As already noted, I have $1,590 plus from salaries. LaSalle Academy this year sent us a check for $2,813 because they were scheduled to come here to play a football game. Unfortunately, it was their homecoming weekend. They asked us to play the game there in exchange for 50% of the gate receipts. So they sent us $2,813. When I mentioned this to Dr. Auger, he stated maybe we could have all our games played at LaSalle Academy.
I'd be more than happy to do that.
I'm not certain the coaches would agree with that. We also picked up $561.33 from the girls' co-op hockey team, the Narragansett Storm, which I stated to you back in the fall would be fully funded. Well, we were assessed that total, $561.33, in girls' ice hockey assessment fees, but Narragansett Storm reimbursed us. Gate receipts for the year. Total collections have run quite well so far for the season. Should this pattern continue, I believe we can contribute approximately $2,500 toward the transportation deficit. With all that said, I've come before you in the past and requested permission to have our athletic teams on, say, 2 games per team for the spring. Allow parents to provide transportation to the bordering towns. I spoke with John Horan from the Transportation Department. He gave me a list of charges for various towns throughout the state. And of course, if we're traveling to East Greenwich, North Kingstown, South Kingstown, etc., the charges are less. Should the school committee allow parents to provide transportation for, again, an average of 2 games for every spring team here at the high school, at Davisville, and at Wickford, we could save another $3,500. And therefore, with all those figures added up, we could make up that $10,000 transportation deficit that I'm facing at the present time. Again, if you'd like to see these figures, I will email as attachments to all the members of the school committee, and I'm here for any further questions.
I'm sure we probably would like to see the attachments, just so, because that way if people ask us questions, we can make sure that we're able to answer them. Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, and I'll be discussing this in greater detail when we get to this agenda topic this evening. On our consent agenda tonight, we have the approved, when I say we, the body of the school committee, previously approved 2 coaches that were volunteer coaches, no salary volunteer coaches. To me, when somebody volunteers, they volunteer, and I greatly appreciate people volunteering their time.
Yes.
That's what gets things done. I spent many years when my son was younger volunteering, coaching teams and whatnot, and I just can't be thankful enough for people who do volunteer. Those volunteers are on tonight's agenda to be paid a stipend out of the summer camp account, one for $500 and the other one for $1,200. Now, I understand they volunteered their time. Maybe we got some money in the camp account. Now we're going to pay them for volunteering their time. And again, nothing against these people. They've done nothing wrong. They volunteered their time. Maybe we do have that money in the camp fund account right now. But guess what? Next year and the year after that, we're going to need more volunteers, and that money that's in the camp account is going to have to pay for some of these sports programs, or the programs themselves are going to be eliminated. So this is something that I will not be supporting tonight. When we approve a volunteer, in my eyes, we approve a volunteer. And I understand that camp account is an enterprise account and the whole 9 yards, but yet now we're going to pay volunteer coaches out of that account when we can use that money to buy supplies for teams or actually fund teams rather than taking it from the school budget, which we're going to see, have that problem will continue and obviously become much more greater in the future. So, again, I understand we've done this in the past. And I'm sure if I check the record, I've probably voted to approve these things in the past. But now that as dollars continue to dry up and we have to scrutinize every dime, in my eyes, when you volunteer, you volunteer.
Understood. Again, this is my third year, and I checked into this when I arrived, and I was informed that that had been a past practice, and it has continued into my third year here. I understand your point, and you may be right in that next year this may have to be something considered by all the teams that have sports camp
Right. I mean,
accounts.
you're struggling to account for $3,000 here, transfer it here, there, and you're doing a great job, and I applaud you for that. But then on the other hand, here, we're approving approximately $1,800 of stipends to volunteers. So it's, it's making your job tougher.
It is, and again, the money is there for the teams who put it in the sports camp account, and as far as I know, it has been a past practice.
It has been. It's certainly, it's not something that you've created. It definitely predates you, and like I said, I'm sure, to be quite honest with you, if you check the record, I've probably voted myself to approve these things in the past, but we have to change the way we do business.
Point taken.
Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
Just a question on the parents' transportation option. Is any other district doing that?
Well, I think we have been doing it for quite some time with, I can think of 6 to 7 teams already who practice and play at off-sites. So those baseball players, softball players, hockey players, swimmers, gymnasts, for years have gone to Lischio Field, Ryan Park, Aim High Academy, St. George's, and they've transported themselves for all practices and home meets. I spoke with Chris Cobain about 3 weeks ago. He is the athletic director at our neighboring town of East Greenwich. And we were trying to get together on Saturdays because we have JV track meets in Providence. Both schools are attending, and we were discussing the possibility of maybe splitting a bus. At that meeting, he told me he has already eliminated some transportation costs by getting parents on Saturday mornings to carpool some of the JV track members to get down to Providence and get back. So in that particular instance, there is a neighboring town who's having parents transport athletes. I have not done a check of all the neighboring towns or the rest of the towns and cities in the state.
Thank you.
Mrs. Carroll, did you want to add anything to that?
We talked about that. Dr. Auger and Mr. Ansello talked about that about a month to 6 weeks ago. And there are some districts where, as you're doing here for specific, will definitely let students be transported to local schools. Now, we're not talking about we're not talking about letting the kids go from North Kingstown to Providence. I think when we talked about it, we were talking about the kids going from maybe to East Greenwich, South Kingstown, the Narragansett, the districts that are in the area.
Bordering towns.
The bordering towns. And as I said, other districts are doing this even to greater extents as cost cutting. If they want the team, then the parents have to transport. So it is happening more and more, and I suspect, Mr. Welch, we're going to see a lot more of it as sports programs are cut and parents are going to have to transport.
I guess my question to you would be, is there a legal problem?
No, and basically, I had to contact the trust about staff members, even staff members transporting, and they gave me some criteria, but basically, the trust understands that in a lot of times, parents or other staff members are transporting kids. So, I mean, that's something that we looked into, Dr. Auger had me look into, just about, transporting kids by staff members, and they know that a lot of private cars are going to different things, so.
And certainly there's a concern here for safety, and Dr. Auger asked that we delay this until the springtime so that we might have more ideal weather conditions. We certainly don't want parents driving our athletes in the middle of a predicted snowstorm. headed to even a bordering town. So we did try to wait until the springtime to attempt to put this into operation.
Mrs. Benson.
First, I'd like to congratulate you on your efforts and what you're doing. And Mr. Welch had the same question that I wanted to ask. But I can remember in olden days, that was a way to get parents, when you carried your own children and you got your neighbor or somebody, to attend the games and to be a part of their children's activities and sports right here in North Kingstown. And why I said olden days, it hasn't been that long ago, but it's still olden days, and sometimes we have to go backwards before we go forward. And the only thing that I would think about, I think you were very much on point when you said you and East Greenwich. The only thing I would think about, if you are transporting someone, because between the 80s, the late 80s and 90s, these are the olden days, America got the fever of suing. You know, if everything happened, people would sue. And I was wondering how that would work out. But I agree, and I think you're very on the ball when you say you talked with the gentleman of East Greenwich, the coach there. And you only mentioned, say, when we go to the towns that are close. Because sometimes when children get into sports, the parents expect the sports to be the parent and everything else and not participate. So I'd like to see you go further and to look in that, and I would like for our attorney to really come back with a legal, with case precedents that's been set other places of the liability, because I was under the impression that if your child is doing anything in the name of the school and is sanctioned by the school, that there is a point of liability for the school. So would you mind looking into that and bring case references of those, Mrs. Carroll?
If that's the desire of the committee, certainly.
I would think that that would be one safety point for the committee, but we do have democracy, and if it's not the desire of the committee, then I can accept that.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Marcello? Mr. Busgarden.
Mr. Marcello, I just want to thank you for putting in hard work. I can only imagine the difficulty you had, because you're not just dealing with numbers, you're dealing with kids, you know. And I look forward to seeing the attachments. Sure. And just keep doing the good work, man.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
I will return to game number 4 of the day.
Dr. J, do you have anything else under superintendent's report?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
All right. We are now into the routine items with the executive session minutes from January 10th, which I believe that everybody has. No, I'm sorry. We have from the December 13th at our table. Is there any disclosure of executive session minutes?
It's just to seal, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I have some votes to disclose.
All right, we've got to seal first.
All right. So do I have a motion to seal the minutes of January 10th, 2012?
So moved.
Second.
So there's a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention. Okay, now disclosure of executive session votes.
All members were present at the January 10th, 2012 executive session of the North Kingstown School Committee, except Bill Mudge and Melvoyd Benson. Motion was made by Dick Welsh, seconded by Linda Avanzato, to adjourn executive session and go into open. Motion passed unanimously. Thank you.
All right, we move into the consent agenda. What exemptions are there to be in the consent agenda? Mr. Busgarden.
C1 and 2, please.
Okay. Mr. Cerisi.
G4 and 7, please. I'm sorry, that's G5 and 7.
So not 4.
Not 4, G5 and 7.
Any other exemptions? Do we need to exempt the executive session minutes for December 13th? Was there anybody who was, I know Mr. Busgarden wasn't here at that time. So we'll just exempt those. I'll look into them.
Mrs. Page, if I could just make a note, one of the items on your agenda is the school calendar, item D.
Oh, yes.
You have a revised version of this. What we had intended to give you is actually in front of you tonight, and the only difference from this to what is in the packet is that this item celebrates one of the Jewish holidays, whereas the mistaken one has two Jewish holidays in there. In this past year, for instance, and in a number of recent years, we celebrated one Jewish holiday because one would land on the weekend. This year we ran into two of them, and as you know, we've had a lot of discussions about the number of days all of our students are out in the month of September, early October. And so looking to celebrate one of the Jewish holidays and not the other one right now.
Yes, and I did take an informal survey of a couple of people who, when we talked about the calendar, I pointed out that if we celebrated both of them on the days that we would have, there would be no full week of classes in the month of September. And so in gathering the opinions that I did, it was decided that the 26th, being the High Holy Day, would be the appropriate day to take off. And then the other day is still a day that anybody who is Jewish may take off and have that as a religious holiday. And we'll just have to make sure that we make staff aware that that is not a day that there's to be any testing or additional material that somebody would miss. All right. Yes, Mr. Welch.
C1 and 2, and was G2 exempted?
No, it was not.
I'd like to do G2 as well.
All right. Is that all for all the exemptions? Do I have a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Anybody abstain? Okay. Getting to the first item, we have B2, the executive session minutes from December 13th, 2011. Do I have a motion to pass those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? And abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. All right, coming to C1, Mr. Busgarden had put this on, and also Mr. Welch. So you can duke it out as to which of you will go first.
Let John go.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Welch. I just, my concern is that with the length of the operator exercise options, that may limit our flexibility going forward in the event that we have to augment the school bus schedule in some fashion.
Not that I'm aware of. I talked with Mr. Draper about this, who was unable to be here this evening, and he and Mr. Horan as well have let me know that these two items have no bearing on, should we look at a reduction in the amount of busing that we do next year, and do not provide any, we're not taking on any new costs to the district in doing this.
Thank you.
Mr. Welch, do you have any further questions?
Yes, I do. I asked for both of these to be accepted out of the consent agenda because back, in the springtime, this committee voted to have an audit done on transportation and it has yet to be done. We're going to move into a budget situation where, quite frankly, as Mr. Busgarden has indicated, we have budget considerations, and quite frankly, the Transportation Department is a department that has escaped scrutiny, if you will, from this committee on trying to make sure that we're operating as efficiently as possible in that area, in routes, in layout of routes, et cetera, to make sure that we have sufficient number of buses, but also that we don't have too many. And when you go ahead and approve this in advance of the actual budget being put together, it's much like forcing yourself into a corner by saying that you're going to have these contracts in effect and can't do anything about them. And I believe that's the same thing that Mr. Busgarden was referring to, and it's what I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Mrs. Avanzato and then Mrs. Benson.
I have similar concerns and had similar questions, so I appreciate the question being asked and answered by Dr. Auger. It sounds as though if we needed to cut a bus, this would not restrict us from doing so.
That's how I understand it, yes.
I still would like to follow up at some point with our previous discussion of a transportation audit. Obviously, we got very busy. We changed superintendents, and we did a lot of other things, and that may have gotten pushed to the back burner, but we probably do need to look at that at some point.
Well, it's something that we voted on. There was a motion that was voted on by this committee, and it has not happened. And I feel as though it needs to be done. It's one of the due diligent things that we need to do.
Mrs. Benson.
I would like to bring to the members' attention that we did have a committee, and they brought a report back that stated we didn't need as many buses, and they gave a comprehensive report, but nothing has been done. I think Mrs. Jill Johnson, I remember her being on that committee. Don't you remember that, Mrs. Avanzato? And we've done nothing with it. And we had, that was a very, very...
It's K5. Continue, please.
Go ahead, Mrs. Benson.
Okay, I'll complete now. That was a very, very good report, and a lot of time and energy was spent on that report. I don't know if you were on that committee at that time, Mrs. Avanzato, but I'm sure you recall, because she was chair, and I think Mr. Walter Cattell was on that committee, and they spent considerably time, but we never got any actions from the report. So it is a good thing to look at the buses, because that report was generated from the fact of the routes that the buses take, the emptiness of the buses, and several things. But we do this, and we don't get or complete or say, this is it or this is not it. And we're asking for the same thing to be done again. Yes.
I just wanted to respond.
Are you, do you have anything more to add, Mrs. Benson?
No, I don't. That's the end of it.
Mrs. Avanzato.
I hope it will be taken and looking into the other report, because we haven't seen that one, now that you asked me that question.
Mrs. Avanzato.
I do recall the report, and they did discuss transportation pretty extensively. I think that was the K5 report, having to do with the redistricting of all the schools. And they did, in their pursuit of the redistricting issues, they did look at busing issues quite extensively. So we could go back and use that and see what they found. I know their main aim wasn't busing, but they did have a lot of discussion of busing in there. So we could maybe take a look at that while we prepare to do.
Maybe that report is in the main office, and we can look at it, and we can digest it. But it was considerably centered upon the buses, because there was one thing that was brought out, that we have 500 or 300 less students, and yet we have more buses. And it was based on that time, so maybe we should look at that report and bring it back before we do another one. I would like to look at it if I get permission from superintendent to come in and look at it.
She submitted it.
All right, so we have 2 action items on our agenda. Do we have anyone who is looking to make a motion about these 2 action items?
Motion to approve.
If I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in, do we need a roll call vote? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All those who abstained? Okay, so I think,
I abstain.
okay, because I was going to say, I wasn't sure if I heard
I
everybody.
really don't like abstentions. I say that's people who can't make up their minds, so I vote no.
Thank you, motion passes. Okay, moving on to G2. Mr. Welch.
Okay. My question is on the position. Is this a position that is required?
Yes.
Certified occupational therapy assistant for the school department? That's a required position? By what reason?
Special ed regulations.
Special ed regulation.
Yeah, I didn't
Yes.
understand that.
Okay, I didn't understand it. It sounded more like, to me, it was for our staff.
No, special ed.
For my own
services.
occupational therapy.
Yes, and that's why I questioned it. Okay, I make a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of G2, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
Sorry about that.
All right, G4, no, I'm sorry, G5. Mr. Cerisi.
G5, thank you, Madam Chair. This is the agenda item that I mentioned previously when the athletic director had spoken. We approved these items way back when as volunteers with 0 salary. Now it's coming before us as volunteers to be paid from the camp account, one for $500 and the other one for $1,200. I'm not going to bore you and reiterate the same thing I said to the athletic director a few minutes ago, but I will not be supporting these expenditures. So that's the reason I exempted it, so we could have an individual vote on that.
All right, do we have a motion on the table, and then we can go for discussion? Is there a motion to approve these items? I'll make the motion to approve. Is there anyone who would like to second that?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. I guess I would look at it as the enterprise funds are usually things, not only are they sports camps, but they are many times for things that the individual sports have raised money for through some of their sales and that sort of thing. And so therefore, that allows them to be able to pay that volunteer coach to be able to get the nicer jerseys because they use it out of their budget. The sports camp, usually what they do is they have students here from the high school who are on the varsity teams who help out for the week of that sports camp in the summer so that they can, because it's usually a lot of the elementary and middle school kids who are at the sports camps more so than the junior high. And so that allows them to be raising money, and the more students they get to participate in the sports camps, obviously, then the more money that goes into their account. And so I do think for a certain amount that is kind of a since it is an enterprise fund, it is a certain amount of money that they think of as they're being able to use that they don't get from the regular school committee account because it is the enterprise account. Mr. Cerisi.
I agree with you, and that has always been the intention in our past practice, but as I said earlier, this is where the school committee needs to step up to the plate and take the reins and make that decision for these organizations.
Thank you.
Because if we don't make these decisions where they want to spend their extra dollars on volunteers, those extra dollars that they're now spending on volunteers are going to be needed to continue to have the program itself. we won't be paying volunteers because they won't even have a team. They won't even have a program. So this is where we need to step up and take the reins and make the right decision for them to try to protect the program itself rather than paying volunteers. I also exempted G7. G7 also has a coach in there that we're paying from the budget, that is budgeted for, that does adhere to the NEA contract, but it has 2 volunteer coaches on there, too, that says 0. 2 volunteer coaches at 0. When the season's over, just like now, these 2 volunteers will be back on our agenda looking for a payment from the activities account or from the camp account. This is, and these people should be told ahead of time. The school committee needs to send a message that we are not going to pay for these positions out of that account because we will no longer be able to have these teams for these kids. I'd rather protect the teams than to be paying for people who volunteered their time.
Ms. Avanzato, and then Mr. Busgard and Mrs. Benson.
Very tough issue because I think people tend to think of this money as theirs because they work very hard and they raise it themselves. For example, the sailing parents, they go out and they work to get this money, and they work very hard, and it's in an account. And it's always been where the group decides in terms of what kind of coaching they want. But I do think that Larry's right in terms of this budget that's coming up next year. I don't think a lot of parents are really aware of how tough it's going to be, how bad it's going to be. And I think next year, for sure, we're not going to be able to do this at all. It's going to have to come to a stop completely. We'll probably need the money for the actual programs. So I really do understand what he's saying. I guess legally, this money is school committee
discretion.
Discretion? Ms. Carroll?
No.
Is there any legal question as to whether or not we have the ability?
I'm wondering why, and I ask this all the time, this is even on the agenda.
Exactly.
Because why are you, if the basketball team goes out and raises money on fundraising, and then they turn around and they want to do something with that money, why do they need to get the school committee's approval?
We've had this argument so many times.
This always comes up. This comes up every single meeting.
But it's in our account, and they're tax exempt because it's got the school department, and we are liable as well.
But they're still going to be tax exempt if it's the basketball team making money, or they could go out and get their own tax exempt status. If it's fundraising, then they should be able to do whatever they want with it. But remember, these enterprise accounts, these are the summer accounts, right? Mm-hmm. And we had a whole big issue a couple of years ago on the summer accounts as to you didn't want to appoint the coaches or things like that. You wanted a hands-off on the enterprise accounts, if I remember correctly.
Well, we wanted either all in or all out,
right.
Not this hybrid thing where we don't have control and we have responsibility. That's the issue.
I think we need to look into this because, again, if it's fundraising, you can't tell them what they're going to do with their fundraising. If I'm a parent, I'm going to raise money for my kid's team, and then a school committee says you have to do X, Y, and Z. You know what? I'm not going to raise the money.
Then it needs to be in people's bank, not in our
This
house.
is the enterprise, though. This is different.
This is different. This is the enterprise account. This isn't the activities account. This is money that is revenue that is being derived by holding sports camps, utilizing the school facilities.
Correct. Right, but if you remember, a couple of years ago, you didn't want anything to say about who the coaches were, because remember the coaches for the summer camps used to go on the agenda, and the committee didn't want to take that?
I don't.
Yes, I believe that was Mr. Mudge who didn't want to.
I think we need to look into this.
I'll withdraw my motion, and we can, so I'll formally withdraw my motion, and then we can place this on item G5 on another agenda.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mrs. Benson.
Back to what happened about these coaches and the summer camp.
But don't be for another agenda.
If I remember, my first term, my question was, who set the price for the summer camps? And the summer camps was run entirely different. It brings me back to the thing that I ask. Anytime we use the name and the appearance that is sponsored by the school committee or the school department, that's the question I need answered, Mrs. Carroll. And I think you and we're working with the other attorney because the price of the summer camp, summer program, it's a little bit high. I know kids that want to go, and they can't. Parents don't have the money. I personally have paid for kids to go to summer camp, and that was when you were the assistants with the other attorney, and many years ago in olden time. But we do need to get this straightened out, because it has always been a thing that was operated on its own. And I'm no attorney, so you can straighten me out, but it's the appearance and the intent. And when we run a summer camp and it goes home as an announcement, like a school department run and so forth, we do have some liability, and you are correct, Mr. Cerisi. We need to, and this is something that need to be straightened out. Not 2 weeks from now, we need to vent it now, because that's the thing. And as I always say, and I'm not stopping, I think I told you that, this is America, we're free to talk. None of us put a time limit on our campaign literature, and when there's urgent business, we should take care of it. And you were right, Larry, about that summer camp. And if you volunteer, you volunteer. Free without service.
Mr. Busgarden.
Thank you, Ms. Page. I agree with Mr. Cerisi. If somebody volunteers, you're volunteering for a reason. You're not volunteering for a little bit on the back end when you're done. And Ms. Carroll, I wonder if the question was posed to the members of the school team, of whichever team we happen to be talking about here, if they would agree to spending $500 on an assistant, on a volunteer coach, or rather put those $500 towards a new uniform, or maybe even a pizza party at the end of the season. I think we might be surprised at what they actually vote for.
Great point.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I said, this is a practice that we need to end. Mr. Busgarden's points were spot on, as well as Mrs. Benson's. And I really don't think the students or the parents out there, the average student or the average parent out there, is aware of the looming budget deficit and budget cuts that are coming. We're going to be eliminating teams, never mind 2 and 3 volunteer coaches. I just don't get it. I don't understand when people out there are really going to come to grips with what's going on. We're looking at cutting classes and every other thing here. And here we are still spending money like drunken sailors on this stuff, you know? So you withdraw your motion. I'm going to put forward a motion to deny payment to the volunteer coaches.
Second.
One more thing before we leave this. I would hope that we wouldn't continue to underestimate the citizens out there. I would hope so, because people are very much aware now. The technology that the assistant superintendent talked about, from 6 to 80, they are applying it. They go to the senior center. I go down there. And everything we're doing here tonight and discussing, they will have a chance to see it and discuss it. So let's not underestimate the power of the citizenry and their knowledge. And volunteer. I have volunteered to be a den mother. I've never yet got a check from Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. That was the olden days, Linda.
All right, so we have a new motion and a second on the table. Mr. August, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a dog in this fight because I don't have any kids playing sports anymore, but one thing that does occur to me is while these sports camps may be viewed as an enterprise fund, when my kids were in school, the perception was if he or she wanted to play a particular sport, by attending the sports camp, it helped their chances of making the team.
Yep.
So the two things can't be separated. And now to take any profits, if you want to call it that, from the sports camps, and when the team is actually now playing and say, oh, we've got volunteer coaches, we have this profit left over, let's pay these people that said they were going to volunteer. It doesn't seem to ring well with me. So, I mean, that's just an aspect I want to bring to your attention. Thank you.
All right, I believe that everyone has spoken on this issue, so Lorraine, how about if we take, Mr. Cerisi, go ahead.
Maureen needs to read that motion back and explain, because it's actually a yes means a, yeah.
I can't believe I'm sitting
Mrs.
here
Berglund,
and
can you read
somebody
the
asked
motion,
for
please?
something that I've been asking for a long time.
Larry Cerisi's motion was to deny
I hear you on this
stipend
end.
to
Mrs. Benson, Mrs. Berglund is reading the motion.
Can't hear her. That's what we're saying.
That's what we're saying, we can't hear.
The motion on the table made by Mr. Cerisi is to deny paying volunteer coaches.
Voting yes.
So if you vote yes, you are denying the payment to volunteer coaches.
Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
It is open up here, and the voices don't carry. I'm just not being...
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Benson. We'll make sure that we talk into the mics.
Yes.
Was number 9 also exempted by
No.
Mr. Cerisi?
No, this is only
Vote on this
G5.
first. Let's not complicate it.
Because the same situation exists in that one.
Wow.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, Linda Avanzado.
Yes.
Mel Boyd Benson.
Yes.
John Biscardin.
Yes.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
Kimberly Page.
No.
Richard Welsh.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1.
Okay, that brings us to G7. This is approval of appointment of coaches, and this is budgeted. Is there a motion that, Mr. Cerisi, you exempted this item?
Thanks.
Sorry, could you say
Yeah,
the
I
number
just-
again? G7, did you say?
G7.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I just wanted to bring to the attention of the committee, this is the same set of circumstances. We have a coach on there that is approved per the NEA contract and per the budget at $1,700. We have 2 people volunteering as coaches that is currently reflected on our agenda as zeros. I want to make it clear that this is what they've signed up for, to volunteer for 0. So 6 months from now or 3 months from now, when an agenda comes in front of us to pay the volunteers X amount of dollars out of the enterprise account, the activity account, it's the same discussion that we just had. So I just want to be clear on that.
I'll add to that. I do have a son on indoor track, and they don't do any fundraisers, at least not that I have seen in the last 2 months. And they don't have a sports camp. So I think that this truly is a volunteer, and he's been working with the students, so it will be the sort of thing of, I don't think this will be coming back.
I have no issue approving this agenda item. I just want to make clear that you're looking at this, potentially the same set of circumstances that we just had a discussion on.
Do we have a motion for this item?
So move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. That brings us up to unfinished business, the 2011-2012 school budget. Dr. Ajay.
I don't have anything on the 2011-12 school budget tonight. I'll have plenty for you next week, though.
Is there anything that anyone would like to ask tonight of the
Our
current
attorney
budget?
would like to talk about a few details.
I didn't know whether you wanted an update on the suit regarding the budget. That's
Yes.
Okay. As you know, on December 15th, the town filed suit against the school committee regarding the possibility of a budget that was going to be in deficit. At that, we immediately had to go to a temporary restraining order hearing that afternoon, because at the time, the town wanted to take over all of the finances regarding the 2011-12 budget. We were able to work out a consent agreement, the town solicitor and myself, where we signed a consent agreement that said a few things. One of them was that we would notify the town of any out-of-the-ordinary expenses, but ordinary expenses would be paid the way we've been doing business, and that wouldn't be a problem. We also agreed that we would confer regarding the appointment of an auditor, and that we would cooperate. There are other terms in terms of that consent order, in terms of the auditor and cooperation, and I, at your request, am preparing a letter to the town to explain to them why we feel as though they're not following that piece. But at the time, we were supposed to go back to court today. The judge ordered us back today on that particular suit. However, about a week and a half ago, I was notified by Solicitor Riley that the judge was changing the date to next Tuesday, the 24th, because he had a conflict today. When I spoke to Mr. Riley regarding the date on the 24th, I asked him, what are we going to do? We have a consent order. We have some disagreement as to whether the audit piece is being followed, but in terms of the bills, we seem to be working it out. We had a little rough, it was rough going at the beginning, but between the solicitor and myself, we were able to work everything out. What are we doing on the 24th? At the time, Mr. Riley didn't think there was going to be a need for us to go back at the 24th, and we would leave everything status quo. However, he's handling this case with Attorney Kinda. Mr. Riley's out of town. I got a call from Attorney Kinda yesterday asking what we were doing on the 24th, and I related to him what I had discussed with Mr. Riley. He related to me that he wasn't comfortable with doing nothing, that he felt that in order for us to do nothing, the school committee would have to agree, and I would have to put it in an order, that we will live within our budgeted amount for the 2011-2012 school year. I explained to him that there was no way I could advise you to sign any such order, because you don't know that that's possible. You could have an emergency tomorrow that could cause you to spend money that was over the budgeted amount. So there was no way I could agree to that. And he said, well, you need to let us come up with a budget reduction plan. And we talked about the budget reduction plan. I explained to him that we had sent a letter, that I had sent a letter, the superintendent had sent a letter to the Auditor General explaining how we were going to come up with a deficit reduction plan, and we were waiting for word back from the Auditor General as to how that was going to happen. He wasn't, I don't believe, it's my opinion through the conversation I had with him yesterday that he wasn't satisfied with that, and he and I agreed that we would speak again before next Tuesday. I can't, obviously this isn't on the agenda as a voting. All I'm going to tell you is that by the time I come back to school committee meeting next Tuesday night, we could have already met in Superior Court on Tuesday morning, and I'm not comfortable agreeing in a consent order binding you to say that you can certainly live within your budget. And I have the same concern, and I'm glad Mr. August got up and spoke to it tonight. The statute says the Auditor General gets a plan and then determines whether that plan is viable. I have a concern at this point how the town council is going to accept that plan. Granted, we haven't gotten it yet. It's been Christmas vacation. I mean, there's been a lot of holidays in there. I don't know when we're going to be getting this back from the Auditor General, but I do have a concern that the town council may not accept whatever plan the Auditor General comes up with. And that's what I need to report to you tonight.
Mrs. Avanzato?
Well, this is interesting in light of recent events. My question is, legally, does the town council need to approve our budget reduction plan? Is that necessary by law?
Not according to statute, absolutely not. The only entity that has to approve it is the Auditor General. They will get back to us and tell us what we do to approve the plan.
So just so it's clear for the record, I need to ask this question. So Attorney Kinder asked you to have the school committee enter into yet another agreement or consent agreement regarding what we are or are not going to do to address our...
He asked me if I would agree to enter into a consent agreement that said that the school committee would live within its budgeted amount, would agree that they were going to live within their budget amount. And as I said, you know, it's nice to say that. You probably are. The budget reduction plan that was presented will allow you to do that. But what happens if there's an emergency tomorrow? Or what happens if we get a bad arbitration award? Or there's a million what-ifs that would cause that to be a problem.
Beyond that, this is just simply overreaching on the part of this attorney. And this entire issue has been overreaching, in my opinion. The way again, to establish for the record what occurred here, is that this school committee offered and wanted to meet with the town council due to a possible deficit that we projected may occur. Dr. Auger was very transparent and upfront about that and came forward with that information to the committee. We then requested to sit down in a friendly meeting with the town council to work things through. I was not present at that meeting, but it's my understanding that our representatives, Ms. Page, our chair, and the superintendent entered that meeting, sat down and found out during the meeting that the town had already filed suit. And they weren't told that by the representatives of the town that were present at the meeting. They were told that by our attorney who called up and let us know that we were due in court at 3 p.m. that day. That, to me, is not a cooperative approach and really troubles me, that we had reached out to them looking to work this out. And this just seems like they're not looking to work this out. They're looking to make a point or score some points, something like that. And now for it to go into this, also, I wanted to say for the record, it's my understanding as well that once we did go to court and we had a consent order that we had agreed to and they had agreed to, which was to allow the school department to proceed and spend money in the ordinary course of business, we then had problems every day, including the very next day, with the town refusing to pay our bills, including folders. Is that correct? Mary Ann, you would have known about that. You discussed it with...
Right after the consent order, for the next 2 to 3 days, we had a daily issue with bills being paid. But I want to tell you that the solicitor, Solicitor Riley, was extremely helpful, and I would call him, he would check, he would call me back. I think within a 3-day period, we probably had 10 or 15 calls going back and forth, and he was able to handle the situation, meet with the finance director and with the town manager, and explain to them what we had agreed to, and so that all of our normal bills were going to be paid. So after those first couple of days, and it was pretty rocky for about, the superintendent and Mr. Draper were like emailing me like constantly. Once those first couple of days went by and the solicitor had an opportunity to speak to the finance director and to the town manager, he was able to work it all out. So since that time, we haven't had a problem.
Well, that's very good, but we just spent an awful lot of money to work something out that should never have happened to begin with. We had just sat in front of a judge and said we were allowed to do X, and we tried to do X, and we got stopped by the town. I just want to point out that this is not cooperation, this is not collaboration. And now we find out further that we're being asked to enter into some agreement that's not required by law, and that, again, appears to be overreaching. We need to work together, and we need to work cooperatively and not try to score political points off the other body. Thank you.
Mr. Buskard and Mrs. Benson.
Ms. Carroll, a question about the request that they asked you, I don't know your legal terms, so I apologize. They asked you to sign a consent that said we could live within our proposed...
Not that we could, that we would.
We would. Could you then, since it's not, could you then go back and say, yeah, except for in case of a catastrophe, or, in case, to cover what you just said, in case there's an emergency where we have to spend, $500,000 on a roof, or something like that.
And the thing is, I would have to say, except if this catastrophe, except if we don't get to arbitration with we're in arbitration on a couple, except, I would have to list an awful lot of exceptions.
Too many exceptions.
We are following the consent order that's in place. We have not purchased anything out of the ordinary. If anything comes up, we're going to notify the town ahead of time for something out of the ordinary. And again, once the Auditor General gives us his opinion as to whether our plan, we will have to, by law, we have to follow the Auditor General. So that plan in and of itself is going to make us live within our budget other than an out of the ordinary expense. I just don't think at this point it's something that I would do to you. I don't think you should sign that at this point. And I do think that it's not necessary, because I think we need to wait for the Auditor General's decision as far as our plan.
Mrs. Benson, and then I'll recognize Mr. August.
I wanted to say that many of the things that you said, as a member of the committee, first time hearing. And when it comes to the judge's decision, I had the good fortune to be down there the first year I was on the school committee, and we went through a judge's decision. And the judge's decision, we have got 2 or 3 things mixed here that we got to go through: town charter, state law, and judge's decision. And really and truly, I've been sitting here listening to you, and we are talking about the order and this, that, and the other. And I always supported a budget, and I think it was the intent of the school committee that a budget is something that guides us. Now, we can't predict when it's going to be a big weather catastrophe, fire, or something like that. I think we'll have to look at those things intelligently. And we have 2 things that guide us: state law and charter. And it's all swirled in there. It's very hard to distinguish. And you may go back. I'm signing nothing. Nothing.
Thank you, Mrs. Benson. Mr. August.
Thank you. I guess I'm a little bit confused by what Attorney Kinder is asking for. If I understand it, he wants an agreement, a consent order, that the school committee will stay within the budgeted amount of $58.2 million.
Well, that's not
is that right?
He and I didn't get to specifics.
Well, I mean,
but
that's what, when he says stay within the budget,
Right.
I would assume that's what he's referring to.
Without the 712.
Well, that's my question.
Well, see,
What if the projected revenue shortfall is real? You can spend $58.2 million, you're still going to be 712 in the hole. You're still going to run a deficit. So I don't see how you can enter into a report with that many contingencies. I just don't think that it's practical.
That's right.
Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
Yes, a couple of things. Dr. Auger, it's my understanding that, with the exception of the revenue shortfall of $712,000, as indicated, we are not in deficit. We will not have a deficit at the present time.
We would still have issues around the ESP contract not being taken care of,
But as of what we know right now,
But we can absorb that.
we could absorb, if it were just that, we could absorb that
So
with
the
the 712.
only the $712,000 is
Yes.
is the cause of a potential deficit. Thank you. You know, for the last 3 years, the town has audited this school department, and for the last 3 years, the management letter on the audit has given this school department a clean slate. Not a couple of hiccups and here and there. It's been a clean slate. Take out a plain piece of paper, look at it, and that's what it's come back as. And I think Mr. August, as the chair of the audit committee and has been on the audit committee, is well aware of that. And I recently sat in on the auditor's draft report with the audit committee and asked that question again: did this current year's audit that ended June 30th, 2011, was there any red flags for the school department? And the gentleman said he had one question, but it was nothing of a red flag. So I want to make it clear that this so-called audit of whatever it is, I never understood, because why are you spending money to find out that the $40,000 that you spent to have the town audited, including the school department, says that we're doing a great job up here? Now, what I heard was, and I believe it was Mr. August that said it, that Mr. Watervek, in his employment contract with the town, he's going to review how we're spending money and come back possibly and tell us how we can become more efficient. I don't know where in the State General Laws 16.2, as it relates to the responsibilities of the school committee, that Mr. Watervik would have a standing. It's not the town's council's standing to do that, and I don't believe it would be any auditor or any firm from hired by the town council that could do that. Mr. August, would you like to respond to that?
Maybe I wasn't clear when I made my comment under citizens' comments. What the consent order says is that the independent auditor, and I'll quote again if I may, the independent auditor will identify areas in which cost savings can be effected so as to avoid a deficit in fiscal year 2012. What I said was, not one aspect of the 9-point engagement letter proposal, not an engagement letter, the proposal that Nato Watervik LLC submitted to the town addresses that aspect of the work. They're not engaged to do that. Their engagement is geared toward, most of it is geared toward something they refer to as a BEP, Basic Education Plan, audit or evaluation of what it costs the school department to comply with the Rhode Island Department of Education's Basic Educational Plan. And there's a few other little wrinkles in there, but there's no part of that proposal that deals with identification of cost savings.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for Mr. August.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Sucio.
Thank you. A very quick question. I'm a little bit behind on this topic, so I apologize. What was the contract for this contract price? Yeah, for this.
$22,850.
Plus. Whoever answered you.
Yeah, plus expenses.
And I'm just asking this question because I think Mr. August is on the audit committee and our liaison to the audit committee. Did the council or the town manager ever come to the audit committee to seek any help or input on this topic before spending $22,000?
I was told by the town manager that there was an emergency situation and they had to act on the matter immediately, and that they could not spend time with the audit committee. They didn't want to involve the audit
Wonderful.
committee.
And I'm guessing that because they classified it as an emergency, this contract was a no-bid contract. There was no bid process on this contract for auditing?
The town manager told me that 2 proposals had been obtained, but again, due to the emergency nature of the situation, that the normal bidding procedures could not be followed.
Thank you for bringing me up to speed, Mr. August. I appreciate it.
I have 2 more quick points. According to the agreement that supposedly was agreed with the judge on the compliance, the town did not and is not following the order. In particular, that there was supposed to be an agreement or workout between the town and the school department on the selection of the auditor, and that did not take place. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yes, all right. And the current agreement that was worked out in court is with the school department, not the school committee. Is that correct?
As your legal counsel, I entered into the consent order with the town solicitor. He signed it, and I signed it.
As for the school committee?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I just want to make, I did not, I was contacted the day the order was to be signed by Mr. Kinder, telling me that there had been 2 proposals. I knew both of the educational personnel in both proposals. I knew one of the auditors. I didn't know Mr. Watervik. I knew the 2 former superintendents that are working with those 2. Mr. Kinder and I had a conversation about both firms. I asked him at the time and he told me the school committee the town council was going to vote that night. I said to him, can the town council just appoint an auditor who will be agreed to between the school committee and the town council? He said that they would not do that, and then I found out later on that night that they had picked one of the 2 different firms. So that's the only conversation I had with Mr. Kinder regarding the auditor.
The last thing that I wanted to say, the $712,000 that we are short in revenue from the state and the Fed, et cetera, the town currently, as of June 30th, 2011, has a $9,157,000 surplus, rainy day fund, cash to draw on to put the $712,000 into the budget as they approved. And let's please remember that they gave us 0 in the budget. We got a 0 budget increase, and they keep on making reference to the school department having a surplus, which we try to build to put into our next budget. If we use up all of our cash surplus, we'll be out of luck.
All right, this is not a voting agenda item for tonight, but Ms. Carroll asked me, or called me late this afternoon, and since we did not have an executive session, she said, and basically none of the things she'd be saying here would be appropriate for an executive session, where this would be advisable that she could basically give everyone this information. And so when we were talking, we said this would be most appropriate under the 2011-2012 budget, since that's what it has to do with. The purpose of her giving this tonight was so that you would all be brought up to speed as to what is going on in the litigation. As I said, and I think it's, as we've said in the letter to the Auditor General's office, we are obviously going to be living within our budget. However, that is not, at this time, we're not going to be signing something because we don't know what emergencies are going to be coming up. We don't know what is around the corner in terms of weather, in terms of health issues and that sort of thing. So we don't necessarily need to have any sort of a vote here tonight or as to where we're going. I think it's just the consensus that, yes, we'll all be living with our budget, and we appreciate the update. Am I correct?
Yes.
Well, there's a consensus not to sign that consent order that she just asked that Mr. Kinder
I'm
asked us to
I'm not
sign.
asking you for a vote. I'm telling you as your attorney, I would not agree to it. So I'm kind of
You
advising
don't
you.
need to hear from us
No.
whether we want to or not?
No.
Right. Well, if you do, the answer is no, just in case you wanted to know.
All right.
Mrs. Page.
Yes, Mrs.
You
Benton.
tend to sit sideways, and the seats are put in a curve. May I make a suggestion so that all of us will feel that we're together? Let's let the seats be straight, because when you sit sideways, the people on the end can't see you. And several times you have your hand up, because I had a question I wanted to ask her, but now that it's over. But I wanted to ask our attorney, and I'm going to ask her, am I correct in thinking that a budget is built around what you think you'll need to live and operate anything, whether it's the diner down here on the corner of Anacatucket Road? Isn't that the purpose of a budget?
Well, that's not really a legal question. I'd look to the auditor, the CPA, to define what a budget is.
But we kept.
I'm not an accountant.
Okay.
I'm not an accountant. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I ask you that question, and I find very rarely do I get an answer from you as a member of the committee. But that will come up at a later date in another venue. But the thing about it is, if you have a budget, and 3 years ago, there were articles in the paper of our surplus. And I always say, great big glowing articles. That was before your day, Dr. O.J. Great big glowing articles of what we had for surplus and this, that, and the other. And I'm of the opinion, and this is where you can come in and give your opinion to me as a school committee member, and you being our lawyer, and I will accept it, that when you ask for a budget and you have a glowing surplus, it means that I gave you too much in the beginning. So all of this going back and forth about this budget, and you were in some of the town boards at that time, and all of this going back and forth, I think it goes back to when we got the first stimulus money. And that stimulus money is going to run out, because we got some. And I never have found out what we used it for, because it was put in our rainy day account. But I'm going to I'm going to withhold my comments because of something else and a few things that might be faced with legally. But
Was there a question for Mr. August?
I don't have a question.
Okay.
can you ask him a question? That was what I asked you at the beginning of the meeting. The thing I'm trying to
If you
get
have a
over-
question you would like to ask him now, you may.
Question.
I have one, but I'd go to hell with him.
All right, I will take that as a no, and we are moving on with Dr. Ajay. Do you have anything to discuss under the CIP bond issue?
Well, this is also under 5E as well with the roof. I know Mr. Draper and the Facilities Subcommittee are pursuing with U.S. Communities some prep work, should the bond ultimately be approved, that we would be in a position to act upon that, hopefully this summer, to get that work done.
And I'm not working out.
I know that Mr. Welch has been inquiring about this as well, in order to line up some kind of an RFP should we need such an item to be fully prepared to go in the summer once and if the bond is approved. So I'm going to have Mr. Draper talk some more about that process next week, and if there's any voting to be done about next steps in that process, we'll line all of that up for next week when Mr. Draper is with us.
Thank you.
I have one question to ask,
Yes,
Madam.
Mrs. Benson.
Are we working on Plan B? Because the kids still can't sit with the water dropping down on them. In case we don't get the bond, are we working on a Plan B? Are you waiting for Mr. Draper to get back and give more information? You don't have any idea of a Plan B? In case A doesn't
Are you asking me? Do I have ideas of a Plan B? I have ideas, none of which I've really done a lot with yet, obviously, because I'm putting my efforts into getting this bond approved. But it has crossed my mind, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Cerisi.
I would like to see us with Plan B.
Thank you. Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you. Going back to the bond that the committee recently voted to approve, a portion of that bond, slightly over $2 million, is budgeted for the roof at Davisville Middle School. I think the discussions that we've had in the past, we have patches on that roof, and we've prolonged replacing that roof as long as we can. I know we've had this discussion on that roof for the past 3 years at a minimum. We've had recommendations from the superintendent. We've had recommendations from the facility subcommittee. We've had recommendations from the Department of Ed and from our architect as well. We've received letters about the failure of the roof being imminent. We have, obviously, leaks in the roof. We have water problems in the school. We have mold problems in the school, which many of you know, mold can easily transfer itself to health problems with students and teachers, and I believe we did have a couple of health issues with some teachers and maybe students as well. I supported the bond. I still support the bond. I think it's very difficult to ask taxpayers for a $6 million bond at any time, especially during these times. I would hope that the taxpayers out there would be inform themselves and arm themselves with the information on this bond to see that it is for health and safety issues and not, gold-plated hand railings and turf on the football field. But I am fearful that regardless of all of that, in this economy, this bond may not pass. And
my point.
And I think people just don't want to spend money. Regardless, as the superintendent has stated in the past, at a minimum, the imminent necessity is that roof at Davisville Middle School for health and safety issues. Now, if you follow the money here and pay attention to the history of the way things have unrolled, the school department previously received, and actually always received, a injection of $500,000 per year into the school's capital improvement budget. It's a total separate budget from the general operating budget. That was meant to have money in that account, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Roger, that account was to have money in it for things like roofs, boilers, flooring, windows, those kinds of expenditures. The last 3 years, we have received $0 from the town council for the capital improvement budget, despite our request for the annual designated deposit. And I believe it spans back further than 3 years. I can certainly account for the last 3 years of not receiving that injection. So when the public wants to know, don't you budget for these things? Where's your money that you're supposed to have to pay for these things? Well, that's where the money's supposed to be to pay for these things. Nothing's been deposited. Very little is there, if anything. Yet, at the same time, the town council has a $9 million budget surplus rainy day fund. So while they have $9 million of your tax dollars sitting over there in a bank account, tax dollars that they've already collected from you, it's your money, it's the taxpayers' money, it's an excess fund, $9 million surplus fund. So while they already have $9 million of your money, we're going to go out and ask for $6 million more of your money? These kind of things just don't make sense, and these kind of things have been continual past practice. Borrow, 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 spend, spend, spend. What I would like to see this committee do, because of the imperative repairs that are needed on the Davisville Middle School roof, is request the money from the town council, from the surplus fund, to pay for the repairs of this roof. That's what I will make that in the form of a motion. I don't know why we're asking taxpayers to borrow more money when we already have taxes that they paid sitting in a bank account.
Second.
Mrs. Avanzado, Mr. Burns-Scarden, and then I'll have something to say.
Just want to comment, because I was also, I'm trying to remember, I was going to say I was also present at the meeting when the auditor spoke, but honestly, I can't remember whether I was watching it on video or whether I was actually there. Was I there? I don't remember. Okay. And there was another meeting that I was watching on video. In any case, I believe the auditors said that this past year that the town got $1 million more in tax revenue, property tax revenue, than budgeted. So they were over budget with their revenues by $1 million. That means they collected $1 million more of our tax money for properties than they needed. And I just want to reiterate and agree with many of the comments that Mr. Cerisi just made. I think to not fund these capital expenditures every year the way it was planned, which is a good plan, which is a way of not hitting taxpayers all at once with these bills, but putting a little bit aside every year for capital repairs and improvements of the building, is a responsible way of doing it. And it's a shame that it hasn't been done up till now, because then you're in a position where you have to go to bond. So.
I'm sorry, if I could just take one quick second.
Go ahead, Mr. Cerisi.
And I apologize. You have members of the council, and I don't necessarily blame them. They're not familiar with the process of funding the capital improvement budget. You have members that they're taking guidance and direction from a town manager. So when they sit at the table and say, well, why don't they have money in their budget for that? And the town is responsible for the buildings, legally. They're responsible for the buildings. We, as a school committee and as a school department, are responsible for health and safety of the students. So when I get a letter from an architect as a school committee member that tells me failure of the roof is imminent, and I don't act, personally, I think it puts the committee, I think it puts the district in a position of liability. And basically, we've been sitting here playing rope-a-dope and allowing the council to shirk their areas of responsibility in funding the capital improvements and repairs of these buildings. And again, I don't want to go too hard in that direction because I don't believe that some of the council members have the knowledge of what the process has been for capital improvements.
Mr. Bosgarden, and then Mrs. Benson.
Just a comment on what you said earlier, Mr. Cerisi, that what you had outlined about having the town council pay for the roof through their rainy day fund. I had spoke with one of the town council members and suggested just that. In fact, I even said to them, you can look like heroes. You can look like heroes, pay for the roof, and it means that we don't have to put that out for bond. And they said the reasoning was that the rainy day fund was high because it kept our bond, the town's bond rating high, and that was the reasoning I got. I don't know how accurate that is, but for what it's worth, that's...
It is accurate, and it does, but at the same time, we're sending the taxpayers broke, putting out more bonds and asking for more money.
But 6 months, yeah, exactly. Where does it stop now?
Thank you.
Mrs. Benson.
I have one question to ask. In getting out of the budget in past years, didn't there always a line in the budget, in our budget, for repairs and things? Now, any roof anywhere has a life, and we knew 4 or 5 years ago, if the roof was put on, I think Dr. O'Day gave me the date this afternoon, when the school was built. When did you say Davisville was built? 19, I should be able to do it.
I don't know that information.
It was 1967?
Yes.
I believe it was
1967. And when the building was accepted, everything has a life. So from 67 up until now, we knew that a roof was going to be intimate, that we were going to have to do something about that roof, because it's like anything else, like the guarantee on your car and the insurance you have to take care of it. Before it gets to a bad place, you might have to have something done to your carburetor or something like that. Now, I maintain that no child needs to sit in a school building with rain on them. I've been at Davisville, and I think it was in the home ec room. They had some barrels in there, and I said, what are these doing here? That was 4 years ago. What are these doing in here? We have a slight leak. Well, if you got a slight leak in your home and you don't get somebody to take care of it and put a line item in your budget for school repair, we've always had that for different things in the budget. So, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not an architect, and I'm not a builder. But when we got up this, I think I was sitting beside you, Mr. Welch, if you will be honest, and they were talking about these committees. I said to you, that is one of your expertise, and I think you should serve on that committee. But we got a problem. And if it's that big a problem, I think we should be looking now, here in January, of moving those kids out and put them over there in Wickford School. We got an empty school. You may laugh.
No, it's not funny.
Because some people up here don't think if it don't come from them, it's no thing. So you can laugh all you want to. But if it's that big of a health problem, same thing back to you. But if it's that big of a health problem, and it's that dangerous, this is just January.
Totally agree.
We can't put anybody in the Wickford School. One, it's not our school. It's with the town now.
Gonna have to put
and
them
it's in
somewhere.
worse case than than
Before
all
I
of our
make a
schools.
bold statement like that, I would look at it.
Yes, Mr. Welch.
I just want to answer one thing that you said. In the budget that we are in now, if you look at the budget, you'll see that there is a line for $500,000 for CIP. I made, if you will, cajoled Dr. Thornton to put it in the budget. The town did not fund the $500,000 for the capital improvement.
And how many years, was that the first year that it has ever been in the budget? Capital improvement?
I can only answer to you that it was in the last budget. Prior to that, it was $500,000 that we were getting.
Uh-huh. And every year since I've been here, it's always been a line, capital improvement.
All right, I'd like to say something. We have a motion on the floor and a second. And my concern with the motion is that I feel like we're a little premature. If we took this motion in April, I think that would be much better after we've had, if we had a vote by the voters and then it failed. But right now, the dilemma is that we have approved the bond. We have had the bond go off to the town council, who has approved the bond, and now it's set to go before our state legislature. This past week, and I sent you all an email, I believe yesterday evening, that I said that I've contacted all of our state legislatures. The process is moving, that it will be going through shortly through the House, so that, and I was told this is pretty much of a perfunctory motion that would then be set so that we will have a vote sometime here in the March-April time period, and which we have to have before the end of April, because RIDE has said we have to have it within 6 months of having the approval from them. It's the sort of thing of, I know that we are in an uphill battle, but it is the reminder to all of taxpayers that we get 30% back if the vote is successful. It is also the reminder that if we don't take the money from the state for our 30% back, there are schools who are waiting to take the money, and Newport being one of them, that will be the next in line who has gone through the RIDE approval. So it is the sort of thing, if it makes sense for our town to approve this. It is approximately about $25 per household. I know in this economy, $25 per household is a lot for some people. I'm not saying that it is an uphill battle. But if we vote now and today to take this and say to the town council, don't go forward with the vote, just go ahead and pay it ourselves, I feel like we're sending a mixed message to taxpayers. We're not really sure. And previously, we have taken the initiative that we say, let's go out to bond. And so that's where I see why this motion is a little premature, that I don't want to send that mixed message that we're not sure if we want to go to bond, we're not sure if we want the money from the town council. We all agree that we want the money to repair the roof. We all agree this is something we need to have done right away. It is just a matter of how do we get the money. And so I would be very supportive of this motion if our vote for the bond does not pass. But I don't feel as if today would be the day to send a message like that to the rest of the town that we're unsure of how we want to get the money. Mrs. Avanzato.
I was just going to make the point that perhaps the letter could discuss Plan B. At least put them on notice that.
And if
the motion is phrased like that, would be a little different. But that wasn't my understanding of how it was phrased. Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the dollar amount in the requested bond could certainly be amended. And I don't think we're sending a mixed message. I think the message that we're sending to the taxpayers is we're trying to utilize the funds that taxpayers have already paid, i.e. the $2 million for the roof from the $9 million of tax money that's sitting in the coffers over there. And we're trying to borrow less money. Rather than borrowing $6 million, we're trying to borrow $4 million to not put the town and the taxpayers in further debt. So the message that we're sending them is, we're trying to be fiscally responsible and operate with what we have already rather than asking you for more. That's the message that I take away from this. And, no. Thank you.
Have we...
Okay, there's there's a motion on the floor, and there's been a second. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Mrs. Avanzado and then Mrs. Benson.
What does the motion as stated basically circumvents the entire bond, as I understood it, rather than suggesting
Mrs.
a lesser
Berglund, could
amount.
you reread the motion?
Motion by Larry Cerisi to request funding from the town surplus to pay for the Davisville Middle School roof repairs. Did you want to add an amount to that? Just the roof repairs.
I apologize. Could you read that back again, please?
Yeah. The motion was to request funding from the town surplus to fund repairs for the DMS roof. That's what I heard.
I would just, maybe to clarify that, and for whatever the bidded amount is, which I think we've had estimates of approximately $2 million, and whatever remaining bond work is to be done, which is approximately $4 million, then that would go out for bond. But the roof, again, why I pinpoint that is it's an eminent issue. It's been an eminent issue for some time now.
Okay, I'm Mr. Buschgarten and then Mrs. Benson. I'm sorry, I got out of order here of whose hands I've seen up.
It's okay. So it's, my question is, this has been bid upon already, this has gone through the bid process, and we have a pretty good idea of what it's going to cost, or is it just what it's just a rough estimate, I guess, is the best way to put it?
One of the things on the agenda was to get a bid, but we don't have that yet. No, this is just the estimate from the architect.
Which, not to say that it's going to be wildly inaccurate, but I think, if we were to go this route, I think it would benefit us if we had a solid number that we could attach to it.
That's a good point.
Can I answer?
Yes, go ahead and answer that, Mr. Welch.
The process is, first, we have to have an RFP to go out for the design of the replacement of the roof.
Okay.
Everything that's needed, okay? And there are some problems with giving a fixed price, because until you take the roof off, you don't know about the damages underneath the roofing surface that are the result of the leaks.
Understand.
And the rust and so forth and so on. So you got to get past the design part, and then you got to go out once you have the design accepted by the school committee, then you got to go out for bid. You need an RFP for that. We don't have that. The only thing that we have at the present time was the architect's best guess, which is, I think we can all say that it's higher than what it is going to probably end up being, because it's a best guess trying to put in all of the problems that we might get to make sure that it's covered.
Worst case scenario.
Exactly. Okay.
Mrs. Benson.
We have talked and talked, and it seemed to be going from one way to the other way. But I still, my little shack on Show Acres, it doesn't even thing, but that's the only thing that I can use as an example when you are.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Benson, go ahead.
It's quite all right. I'm through. I don't have anything to say.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Cerisi.
I just want to make clear that what I'm trying to achieve, the objective in this motion, is that we're sending this request to the council prior to a bond vote.
So you're saying we would do this prior to going out to vote?
Right. This letter, there's no reason that this letter can't be, it's not a rocket science. There's no reason we can't have council or clerk or superintendent draft the letter conveying the points of our discussion here and making this request by, what's today, the end of this week. We're talking about a bond vote that will be sometime in April or May.
May I add something to what he's saying?
Yes, Mrs. Benson, go ahead.
And this is January. and we have stated that it is for the health and safety of the children. The beginning of winter, January. And when I spoke up and said, we need Plan B, who knows? We might wake up one morning and be the same as they were in New Orleans. But it seems to be cut in concrete, set at the way you all want to do it. And you have to have a Plan B. I don't think it's no citizen in this town, and I've been here longer than any of us sitting here, and have been a citizen, and was active before I went in public office, would want to see a child in this town be put into danger of health and safety. It's all in the way you explain it. People know that. People know that. Nobody wants to see a child exposed to anything. If you took a survey tomorrow, nobody. Children is something that the worst of people like to give into, even though we have a lot of people misusing them now. But nobody wants to see a child put in danger. And if this thing is explained correctly, and the line that has been in our budget for years, capital improvement, and is explained, you can't go back and bring all those people that were here before all of us sitting here that had those lines for capital improvement and didn't do it. It's a case of waiting too late. It's a case of waiting too late. Is there any comments about anything I said, Mr. Welch? I see you passing notes.
Mr. Welch needs to leave in about 15 minutes. What I will say is, I hadn't really thought of this from this perspective. I do see the validity in asking the town council before we take the vote that we have exhausted other options. So it actually improves our standpoint in terms of going to the voters. And that was not something I had really thought of before. And I do see where, we all, like we always said, we all agree this is something that is imminent, that we need to have fixed. So it would be better to ask the question now and get the answer, and then if we need to take the vote, then to wait and not know if that is an option later. So I think I've changed my mind as I've sat here. Unless there's any more current comment, I would say that it's time to vote, just because our evening is running late. So, Mrs. Avanzado, do you have something you wanted to add?
I'll defer. That's okay.
Mrs. Berglund, could you take a roll call vote?
Could she read the motion back?
Yes.
The motion was to send a request to the town council to request funding from the town surplus to pay the cost of DMS roof repairs only, with the remaining bond work would go out for the bond. Is that correct, Mr. Cerisi?
Oh, yes. No. Is that your intention, Mr. Cerisi?
Okay. Let's go ahead and take a roll call vote, please.
Melvoin Benson.
Am I permitted to ask a question before I cast my vote?
No, not really. You're supposed to be casting your vote. That was what we had.
I understand that. I'm not illiterate, Madam President.
No, I didn't mean it like that. It's just that this is the time to vote yes or no. If you would like us to come back to you, we may.
You may come back because there's
okay. Go ahead. I
didn't interpret Mr. Cerisi's as the way you're putting it.
Go ahead. Next
because
person.
I still hang that if there is a health and safety
Larry
issue.
Cerisi.
Yes.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Richard Welsh.
Yes.
Linda Avanzado.
Yes.
Mrs. Benson.
No, not enough understanding, and please put that in the record.
Okay, motion passes 5-1.
Uh-huh.
Dr. Ajay, it's my understanding that you wanted to hold off on the maintenance truck lease bids because we hadn't received all the bids back. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That brings us down to 2 items left on our agenda, policies and IT consolidation, or as Dr. Auger has recommended, a collaborative plan. That may take a little more talking, so could we go through the policies quickly, and then we'll go back to IT, if the committee is okay with that?
Whatever the pleasure of the committee.
May I ask
My
a
pleasure
question?
as well.
May I ask a question?
Why don't we
Madam
wait
Chair,
until we start talking about policies?
This is not related to what we're going to talk about.
What is your question, Mrs. Benson?
My question is, Welch, I see you're wearing a watch. What time is it?
It is 25 minutes before 10.
And you just sent a note saying you had to leave in 15 minutes.
I will be leaving in 10 minutes, Mrs. Benson.
That's what I was going to ask, so
Okay, so
I would
let's...
ask that we do not discuss any of this because 10 minutes may be too much and it may not be enough.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the IMG service manuals? This is, has been on our agenda quite a few times. This is a second read. This is a policy that has come down from other districts' policies on how to handle this situation.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye. This
All
is
those
the second
opposed?
reading.
We also have on a policy here tonight the IJOC on school volunteers. Basically, Martha Pugh has asked that we set a time limit for that people have 5 days in which to get their Corey reports in before they're going to, or like on a field trip for people, because what she's finding is that people will turn them in and then expect the turnaround the next day. And so she's asking if there would be a 5-day limit, then if people didn't give that amount of time, then they could deny them. And so that's the changes to IJOC and IJOCR. So do I have a motion to pass those two?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
question
Oh,
on
yes,
Mrs.
Mr. Welch.
When I read through this, I was looking for what happens when you have chaperones on school trips. They're not theoretically volunteers, but they are volunteers of a sort.
Yeah, they're considered the same thing.
They weren't specifically mentioned in this, and I think they ought be because of the police clearance, et cetera, that we do for volunteers.
They're the same thing. If you're a chaperone, you're a volunteer. And so it's the sort of thing, if it doesn't matter how much if you say, oh, I'm merely a chaperone, we're still saying you're a volunteer. So the chaperones have to do the same background check of somebody who's, if it doesn't matter if you're volunteering for 1 hour for the field trip or 25 hours because you're that mom who has lots, or dad who has lots of time.
Even Kate Middleton had to get her background clearance, so
I had to get one to teach Sunday school.
Okay.
she wanted
All
to
right,
be
as long as you feel as though it's
chaperone
covered.
on the school trip.
Any other questions on that? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. We won't talk about the other policy, so let's get into IT collaboration. Dr. Ajay, could you speak on that?
Yes, as you know, we recently had a meeting with the town council, and there was a lot of work done by a consolidation committee. Consolidation committee put forth, I wouldn't say it's a detailed plan, but just basically a consensus on their part to move forward with, in creating a detailed plan around consolidation. As I understand that in my discussions, particularly with, Mr. Embry and with Mr. Stam and with Mr. Mudge, I think there's a feeling that that plan would end up being something where the town IT department would take over the leadership of the North Kingstown School Department IT department. As I've expressed on many occasions, that is something that I cannot live with. I think that we have an excellent IT department, and we have an ELERT report at the cost of $40,000 to tell us, to confirm for us, which is what we already know, that we have cut back on our department significantly, and we have a hard time responding to service calls because we're so short-staffed, and that we've done an excellent job at being financially prudent, saving a lot of money over the years in IT. And I think the leadership in that department is strong. I think the workers are very good to us and have done an excellent job for us at a remarkable cost savings. So I'd hate to lose that. What I am okay with doing for the time being is consulting with Mr. Embry, the town manager, to look at models where we can talk about some planning around consolidation ideas, projects, or if you would, collaboration. That we would collaborate together, that we would make plans to routinely talk with one another about cost-saving projects as they come forward. I think, that kind of approach would be best, and I think that would put the discussions in the place where it is the people who are closest to this that can help make the decisions. I find that the Consolidation Committee, while it has noble intentions and has done a lot of really good work, is way too cumbersome to make decisions around detailed, management of IT for our departments. And I think those decisions are best left to discussions between Mr. Embry and myself, Mr. Booth, and Mr. Albuquerque from the town IT department. And so what I am asking you to approve tonight is the continuation of some talks between myself and Mr. Embry and our IT leaders to look at cost-saving measures, and that may include some ideas that are considered consolidation. It may include some ideas that are considered collaboration or even cooperation, whatever you term. But that for right now is left open-ended. In talking to Mr. Embry about that, I think his approach is more in thinking in terms of a consolidated approach. But he also asked me that if any continued discussions would take place after budget season, considering how busy we all are with those particular decisions, and that once our budgets are approved, we would get to that work of talking about the details of whatever this future plan would look like.
Okay, Mr. Busgarden and then Mrs. Avanzato.
I'm glad to hear you say that, Dr. Ogier, because I'm a big fan of consolidation and eliminating redundancies and gaining an economy of scale that maybe we didn't have before. Mm-hmm. However, I understand your and everybody's trepidation about, especially the one phrase that kept jumping out at me was the blind faith. Not a big fan of blind faith, but I think to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, I think it's kind of premature. You've mentioned to me before, and a lot of people I think are in agreement that the way the school committee, the school and the town works with Public Works, which is more of a collaborative event as opposed to a consolidation. Why can't we dip our toe in the water like that with this? Find small things that if we don't like it, it costs nothing, costs relatively little to change back. When you get into the larger things that cost a lot of money, then that's when you have to really consider, is this working or not? But I think there's a lot of things that can be discussed to make sure that you can get that that synergy working between the two of you.
Mrs. Avanzato and then Mr. Welch.
I would agree very much with those comments by Mr. Busgarden, and Public Works is a great example of that, I think. Mm-hmm. Also, I believe what the council voted on was a very similar concept. I don't think that the council necessarily endorsed moving forward with the ELERT report's recommendations. That's not what their consensus was. It was more of a consensus like the one you're looking for here in terms of getting together and having the manager, authorizing the manager and the superintendent to get together and to continue these discussions to see where they could go. When it comes to the report itself, I have a number of different reservations about it. The first of which is that it recommends spending over $1 million before we proceed forward. That just can't happen. We just don't have that money. It's just not there. And I understand that they're hoping on some savings down the road over 10 to 15 years. But I think it would be more than that before you'd make that amount back. I really do. And there's no guarantees that you'd make that amount back. So sitting down and looking at little pieces and ways of collaborating might actually create a lot of efficiencies and save money in the long run as well. So I would suggest going in that direction. Like as I said, a number of reservations regarding the report. as well as the expense, also, we had asked for some direction on maybe outsourcing some pieces, and we didn't get much of that in the report. The conclusions that the report made regarding the fact that our staffing ratio compared to the towns is not as good, and our infrastructure is not as good. Not surprising, again, since they spent $500,000 unbudgeted to build a new IT center right in the middle of these discussions of consolidation. We were discussing moving, their servers over to the CD building, and then all of a sudden they were building a building. So the fact that we've cut 4 full-time positions from IT because we're trying to be more efficient, there's no surprise that we were seen as the department that has a poor staffing ratio compared to theirs and not as good infrastructure because we just haven't spent the kind of money that they have. And we've tried to whittle down, and we haven't been getting the money from the town. So,
Mr. Welch.
Yeah, I just want to say that as the past chair of the Consolidation Committee, I was a proponent of getting this consultant hired to answer some questions. And one of the questions that he answered was that the number that had been bandied around for the last several years, that consolidation of IT would save the town taxpayers $300,000, it just has not come true. This $40,000 that we spent showed that the only thing that they could save in their mind was one position at $72,000 a year. And I disagree with that assumption. The next thing I would say to you is that I agree with trying to work with the town in any way, shape, or form on consolidation, whether it be IT or maintenance or janitorial, you name it. It's all taxpayer dollars, and anything we can do to promote efficiencies with taxpayer dollars, I'm in favor of. I am not in favor of Mr. Booth losing his position. I feel he is extremely important to where we are today, but where we're going. You heard tonight from Dr. Humbert about how the technology is going to take over our education program. We can't do that with someone who is not familiar with education and the things that are required. We had a discussion, Dr. Auger and myself and Kim, about where we're going in the future with electronic books, et cetera. It's coming, and it's on us very soon. And I got to say that the staff that we have has done a very good job with the limited amount of resources we've been able to give them. So that's what I had to say. Thank you very much.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to just take a step back for a moment and just try to offer more of a historic overview of the Consolidation Subcommittee, because we do have people, administration and school committee members who were not here at that time. In 2007, myself, then Council President Ed Cooney, and then Councilman John Patterson had put forward the idea in one of our joint meetings with the council, the idea of a consolidation subcommittee, with the intent, as Mr. Boscadan has stated, to consolidate redundant town and school department services. And also the intent, the original intent, which has gotten lost in all of this, is that one committee would appoint, the consolidation subcommittee would be co-chaired by an appointed member from the town council and an appointed member from the school committee. And that those appointed members would be from opposite political parties. The intent there was to take the politics out and to try to get some real work done. Because, unfortunately, in small-town politics, if you have a committee that's chaired by 2 Democrats, well, we're going to beat the Democrats up. If it's chaired by 2 Republicans, well, we're going to beat the Republicans up. So to take that out and try to really get some work done for both the town and the school department and the taxpayers was to implement it with members of different political parties, take away the partisanship. Fortunately, we've continued on that trend. It's always been, the co-chairs have been from opposite political parties. We've had new chairs, co-chairs of that subcommittee. We've had new superintendents on that committee over the years, new town council members. We still have some of the same community volunteers on that subcommittee. Some of those people have changed as well. The one constant that we've had on that subcommittee is the town manager. I just wanted to offer that perspective of what the origination was, what the intent was. Now, I went back and looked through some old minutes to try to gain some perspective on where we were and where we are now. In 2008, Council Member Patterson, John Patterson, who had co-chaired the committee with me at that time, discussed information technology. He discussed how it's been the hardest area to work together. Now, we're going back almost 4 years ago. He went on to say, the town service, and this was a discussion and a agreement in consolidation subcommittee to bring back to the 2 bodies. The town service will move into the school department CD building, which houses the school service. This is being evaluated in order to phase in the move. The 2 bodies can eventually develop a 3 to 5 year plan for technology services, as well as working on creating a technology fund for personnel efficiencies. And I strongly agreed with John on that, and we put a lot of time into working on that together. Well, what has transpired, I don't know where that plan went. I don't know where it fell off the map, but I do know while we were in the middle of that process, the town council, with the recommendation from the town manager, spent $500,000 to build to add a new technology room to house the town service. May not have seemed like a big deal back then, $500,000 from capital reserves, but now that we're getting in times like this and we're talking about these other items, it certainly is a big deal. So in my mind, I would strongly encourage the subcommittee, I would strongly encourage the superintendent and town manager to move forward, as you said, consolidate or collaborate in any areas possible. But in my mind, steps like that, those are roadblocks. That's circumventing consolidation. That's disingenuous. And again, I'm going to give the council a free pass on this one, because I don't believe that the council was aware of the actions that were already taken in the direction that was given by the prior council to the town manager at the time. But the town manager was there from the start of the formation of this consolidation subcommittee. So the left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing, because when we don't know that, that's when the taxpayers lose and the students lose. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mrs. Benton.
I would like to say, Mr. Cerisi, you are exactly correct. I think you and I were sitting on that committee, and I was sitting on the committee 2 years before you came. And it was not only IT, but what has happened is a funny thing happened on the way to the farm. We can't even agree who's going to cut the grass. That was one of the little things. We can't even agree who's going to cut the grass. I was reading the specs for the leased new truck, and one thing was made clear back then, that we would try to keep as much business, do you remember that, to people in town. And I'm reading about a snowplow Well, we have a manufacturer down here that makes snow plows, Pathfinder. And that's almost what you'd call a neighborhood business. So with the change of people in the council, on the school committee, it's very hard to keep up with the original thing. And I want to close by saying this. If the roof is that important for health and safety, we better start looking at a plan B. Because who knows, Hurricane Irene might come through. And I make a motion that we adjourn. It's 10 o'clock and after.
Well, it's not quite 10 o'clock, but I guess, the question
Have a
here is
motion.
that...
I have a motion.
Yes,
and I've
Mrs.
made a
Benson.
motion.
Is there a second?
I think we should let you finish your comments.
Okay, thank you.
After you finish your conversation, we'll go back and I'll make the motion that we dismiss.
Thank you. Dr. Auger has asked us that he would like to basically move forward with this collaboration. It does seem that after budget would be the time to do that because, as we both know, this is going to be an all-consuming event over the next couple of months. I don't think this is something that we necessarily have to take any sort of a vote. As I remember, the council did a consensus vote, and from what I've heard here tonight, it's pretty much that's what everybody is saying here tonight, that we encourage Dr. Auger to be moving forward, to be looking at ways that we can collaborate. Obviously, it is good to always be reminded of where we have come, and so unless anybody has anything other to say about that, I think from what I'm hearing is that we're all urging you to move in the direction of your recommendation, Dr. Auger.
Thank you.
You have our consensus.
Thank you.
Let's use the proper language all the time, because when we come back and if I said something, it's all different.
Thank you. I think we've pretty much gone through the entire agenda. Dr. Auger, was there anything else that we needed to address tonight?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Now, Mrs. Benson, I will take your motion.
Maybe you should make it.
Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.